Hello and welcome. This is another episode of the live stream for Antigravity Wellness. I am your host, Dr. Nicole Smith. I am the founder of Antigravity Wellness. Antigravity Wellness is a virtual practice in Washington State that specializes in the care of the perimenopause and menopausal woman. We do nutrition, fitness coaching, and also hormone replacement therapy and functional labs. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, the reason why I even started Anti-Gravity Wellness was because I saw a gap in the care that was being given from Western medicine and then to all of the people who needed help but weren't sick. So, in order to provide that type of care and to actually get the results that they needed, we needed a combination of things. We needed more than just your standard care. Going to a doctor's office, sitting there for hours, seeing your provider for 15 minutes, and then getting a prescription and going home and not seeing them for another year. This model just doesn't really work. Now, when we have chronic medical conditions and we need to manage, that's something that we utilize, but there's more to it than that. And especially for women, women typically get dismissed, and especially through perimenopause, as we're starting to go through all of these changes and our bodies are acting weird and our brains are acting weird, and we're just not ourselves like we used to be. It can be very frustrating when you're trying to convey how you're feeling and how it's not normal for you, and the person across from you just isn't listening to you. So that is one of the things that I try and provide at Anti-Gravity Wellness. And the whole goal of this is to provide that care that will give you that sense of someone cares and someone's going to help me and this will work. So that's what we're doing here. So let's go ahead and dive into the functional labs. Now, there are some places out there that will give you things like hormone replacement based on symptoms alone. However, from the research that I've looked into and the mentors that I've had who've been doing this longer than me and running their own hormone replacement practices with women, our motto is test, don't guess. So we can surmise all we want, and a really good history is very important, and making sure that we understand all of the symptoms and the medications and the surgical history and past history of trauma and everything that's been going on with a woman. But if we're not testing labs, we're missing a huge chunk of the picture. And it's all of these, elements together that do the detective work of figuring out why she's feeling the way that she is so that we can put it in place, a treatment plan to address that and get her to feeling a lot better. So this client that I have here, this case study, is a great example of this. So she says, when I came to Nicole, I felt like it didn't matter what I ate. I didn't lose, but I would only slowly gain weight. I felt like garbage all the time, and I wasn't sleeping at all. I was struggling to get my physician to help me with an action plan because my labs were all within normal limits for Western medicine. Super, super common. When Nicole looked at my labs as a functional medicine practitioner, she validated what I had been feeling. She helped me identify the inflammation in my body and solved my GI issues that I always associated with not having a gallbladder. This lifestyle change has not been overnight, but it has really shown me how I can feel and look. Most importantly, she helped me to realize that it is okay to prioritize me. I am worth making myself a priority to help take better care of my family. I've not reached all my goals yet, but I have made some great lifestyle changes that are allowing changes to happen slowly to ensure they are just that, lifestyle changes. I'm so grateful for all I have learned and for all the healing my body has seen. So this is a great example of a client who was really struggling for years with a lot of issues, and they would kind of help her a little bit, but then just get her to the point where basically she wasn't like diagnosably sick. She just didn't feel right. When we took a closer look and went deeper into more of the functional labs, which we're going to get into today, then we could see, oh, no, you're not crazy. You're not making this up. It's not all in your head and it's not just how your body is and you just have to live with it. There's actually something going on here that we can address. And we did address it and it worked. So, why functional labs matter? There are a lot of hormonal changes that happen as we age that really impact your overall health. So, things like your thyroid health, your adrenals, your gut health, and your sex hormones, of course. All of these things play together. And as we grow older, the things that we've been putting our bodies through this whole time, the inflammation and everything that we've been going through, these affect how quickly things start to go downhill. Now, there's a way to, age well and continue to be healthy and active and vibrant well into your older years. And then there's a way to not do that, right? Those people are in the hospital a lot and they tell me as I go in as their nurse or their nurse practitioner, they say, don't get old. It's awful. And it's sad because I know that's not true. It doesn't have to be that way. There's so many things that we can do to take care of ourselves going into this. And we don't need to be living the last third of our lives in misery. Functional labs help us to identify those imbalances that are underneath the surface, that are kind of brewing. They're what's called subclinical, meaning that they may not be triggering a diagnosis in a primary care provider's office, but you better believe they're affecting how you're feeling and how you're operating in your life. So with these, we can then target treatments based on the labs and also how the patient's feeling, the symptoms, and your lifestyle preferences too. So it's a holistic thing that takes into account the person, not just the numbers, but also the person, to making sure that we're getting them the best care possible. And again, we test, we don't guess, to avoid unnecessary treatments and to optimize health outcomes. So when I do a lab review with the patient, I take those lab results from the lab, like blood work. And when I send them to the labs, the lab will charge their insurance. I'm out of that part of it. I put in my orders, all the diagnosis codes that I can possibly link to justify the labs, and then it's up to the insurance company to determine if they will agree to pay for those or not. And there are hundreds of insurance policies out there. So I do not know if your insurance will cover them. That's up to you to call your insurance and check with them to see, are these labs covered? But by the time that most people come to me, they're at the point where they don't care if it's covered or not. They just want to feel better. And they're tired of spending years and years and spending a lot of money up until this point, not getting answers. So they're willing to just let's just get the answers we need. So we have the Western lab range, which is what you'll see on the lab order form or the lab results form. And that's their normal ranges. And that's the sick range. And then there's the functional lab range, which is different. The functional lab range is more of the optimized range. And that's more where we work with people at Antigravity. We try and get them more towards that optimized range, taking into account also individual variances. Everyone's a little bit different. So when we pool all of these people, and by the way, the Western lab range is based on a sick population. So keep that in mind. When we pool all of these people together, there's plenty of people who, you think of that bell curve, right? So we're kind of saying, oh, this is the range of normal, but there's lots of people on the sides of that. And for some of them, though they may not be perfectly within the range, it might be normal for them. And sometimes this is a genetic thing, oh, this runs in my family, and for them, it's not a problem. Their body's used to it and they're functioning just fine. So we always take these things into account. So this is the list of the initial labs. And if you stay till the end, you will be able to see, or if you're watching, if you comment labs, we will send you a copy of this list so that you can go to your medical provider. If you're either not in Washington State or you can't come to Antigravity for some reason, we are telemedicine, so we can go anywhere in Washington State. But let's say you're not a Washington State resident, then we typically don't do labs for people there. because I can't diagnose and treat outside of Washington State currently. That'll be changing. We'll get more providers on board too that will have licenses in other states so we can start expanding our services, because it's, again, really high need for this. But you can take this list to your provider and say, hey, which one of these, can we talk about maybe getting some more in-depth labs to see what's going on, because I'm still not feeling well and I'd really like some answers. So let's go over these. I'm going to try to not go too deep into the weeds. I spent several hours putting this together, and I have a whole list of resources too for those of you that do want to go deeper and want to learn more. There is a link to the resources that I put together in a Google document for you. So you're welcome to access that and take a look and go down that rabbit hole if you'd like. So first of all, we look at a CBC, which is a comprehensive blood count. And now on here, what you're going to see is things like white blood cells, red blood cells. We look at things like anemia that can cause like fatigue. And then we also look at underlying either like inflammation and or infection can show up on this blood work. Next up is a CMP, which is a comprehensive metabolic panel. So we're looking at things like electrolytes, like sodium and potassium, and we're looking at your kidney function and your liver function. So those are the major things that are included in the CMP. We want to make sure that we're looking at the entire body and not just at the sex hormones when it comes to perimenopause and menopause, because the body is one big unit, and those things will affect how other symptoms are showing up. So, and we're going to talk about this some more. Sometimes you can have like a thyroid problem and it looks like perimenopause symptoms. But when we take a look at the labs, we say, oh, well, your thyroid is like not functioning the way that it should. So let's address that and see if your perimenopause symptoms get better. Again, this is why we test. A lipid panel with a VLDL. A VLDL is a very low lipid density. So there's many components within that. I won't get into too many details, but basically this is one of our risk factors for developing heart disease, and also for a risk factor for stroke. So the higher that these fats are running rampant in our bodies, the worse that is. It gets gooey. You think of it like that, like within your arteries, it can get gooey. Okay. And then homocysteine. So homocysteine has a role within cardiovascular disease. And with this one, it has been shown to damage the blood vessels and contributes to heart disease. So the higher this level is, the worse it is for your risk factors for heart disease. So it's definitely something that we want to monitor. Not something that we typically look at though in your normal, primary care blood work. So it is definitely something that we want to make sure that we are actually including, because it is such a risk factor. And a lot of people that I see that do have elevated homocysteine levels, I start to suspect, especially if they're of European descent, that they might have that MTHFR genetic variance. So what that means is that you do not methylate, take the B vitamins and turn them into the active form. And this is a whole big process. And I did a separate video, and I'll probably do another podcast on this later about MTHFR, because it is so very prevalent. But with this, that will increase the homocysteine levels and increase your risk for heart disease, increase your risk for depression, increase your risk for other things as well. Miscarriages, things like that tend to go up with this. So it's definitely something that a lot of people don't know about, but it's very prevalent in the population. And it is something that we want to address. So we need to give you extra B vitamins, methylated B vitamins that are activated for you, as your body is not able to do that. And then there's a CRPS, C-reactive protein, and the sensitive one is a little bit more sensitive as far as cardiac risk factors, heart disease risk factors. You see, I'm talking a lot about the heart. We really want to make sure that that whole system is working well, because especially if we're going to go down the road of hormone replacement, we really need to make sure that the heart is working well, that we don't have any underlying heart disease going on, as putting you on something like estrogen could actually initially increase your risk as it improves your vascular system. But if there's something, if you have blood clot, the atherosclerotic plaques, so you have like these sticky plaques that are inside your arteries, and then they're hardened, and then we soften them up with the estrogen. Those are more easy to break and then cause problems with them in that first year. So that is definitely something we need to be aware of and monitor. And then this will just show us like inflammation. So it's not descriptive, like we can't tell where the inflammation is coming from, but if your CRP is high, your inflammation is high, and we want to address that wherever it's coming from, usually from the gut. And then vitamin D25OH, this is the activated form of vitamin D. And that's why I like to test this one in particular. But vitamin D plays a really pivotal role in bone health and immune function and a lot of other things. And we can even see like low sex hormones. We can see vasomotor symptoms such as hot flashes, vaginal atrophy, which is like the drying up those tissues, and pain with that. Um, and sexual dysfunction can happen because of a low vitamin D. So you can see how important it is to really make sure that we're addressing this. And in addition to, of course, your risk factor for developing weaker bones, having osteoporosis. And then we'll also look at vitamin B12. We could go down the rabbit hole and test all of the vitamin B vitamins, but for just the initial, B12 is one of the more important ones, involved with energy production, neurologic function. It is a very common deficiency in perimenopausal women, either from lack of intake or from lack of absorption through the gut. If your gut is not optimized, and like you have like low acid or high acid or dysbiosis or SIBO or anything going on down there, your absorption will be altered, and this will be altered as well in your blood. You're not going to be able to get that out as well. And you will have lower energy levels. And it will also, if you're not, again, methylating B12 because of like an MTHFR situation, then we're also going to have some issues there. And then the iron panel and the ferritin. So this is really kind of back to the CBC that we're talking about with your red blood cells, but this goes deeper. This is going to show us your actual iron stores, especially the ferritin. The ferritin is the iron that's stored within the blood cells, or not the blood cells, but like the cellular content of iron. And this, one of the number one complaints that I get is fatigue. Well, this is one of the things that can be going on. Now, premenopausal women tend to run a little bit lower on their iron stores, and it's thought that that's because of the menstrual cycle that we lose more, and it does take some time for that to build back up. And then as we get older, it starts to increase, and we want to make sure that we're neither too low or too high, because too high can also cause problems. So it's definitely something that we want to monitor. And then the sex hormone panel, we have testosterone, progesterone, estradiol. There's several different types of estrogen, but estradiol is a good one to start with. Sex hormone binding globulins. So that is a protein in the blood that actually hooks on to things like testosterone. So that will affect if you have symptoms or not, even if the levels are normal. And then FSH is follicular stimulating hormone, and LH is luteinizing hormone. And I know you guys' eyes are glazing over right now, but watch this a few times and you'll kind of get the hang of it. And I think it's important for us to have a general overview of what these labs are and what they mean, because it's your health, it's your body, and it enables you to make better decisions about your health care when you have a general idea of what's going on with the labs, instead of just listening to your provider who may or may not be looking very closely at these things. And then you can ask better questions too. So FSH and LH come from the brain and they go to the ovaries, and it's just part of that cycling phase. And as we go through menopause, FSH and LH spike up, and that's very normal. We don't actually, they've thought about using these for diagnosing menopause, but they're not super accurate. So that's why menopause is still defined by symptoms of 12 months without a menstrual cycle, regardless of what the sex hormones are doing, because they can fluctuate so much. But I've also seen things that said, oh, we don't even look at that because it fluctuates so much. But again, from what I've seen and the mentors that I've had and the other providers that I've talked to, it is a good idea to know what's going on in there and to kind of have a ballpark. We can't get exact because yes, it does, even throughout the day, your estrogen and testosterone levels can fluctuate. However, we do our best, right? So when you do get your blood drawn, and this is kind of across the board with any of these, you want to get it done at the same time of day under similar circumstances. So usually I have people go in fasted in the morning and to get their blood drawn. And with sex hormones, especially, we want to make sure that we're testing those if you're still cycling about 7 days after you ovulate. So for most women, if they have that normal range of like 28 or 26 to 28 day cycle, that would be day around 19, 20, or day 21 of their cycle. So we want to get it about in there. And this is because that's when progesterone is going to be nice and high. We can get a good measure on that and see everything else that's going on there. All right, and then we have DHEAS. And this one actually comes from the adrenal glands. And the S part, the sulfated part, is the activated part. Again, I like to look at the activated form of these hormones that are actually biologically active in the body. If we're looking up the road, we're kind of looking more investigative of like what's going on as far as this pathway is concerned. But for the initial labs, let's just look at the active and see what's going on there to see if we can correlate it with symptoms that it could be related to. So DHEA, there is a difference between DHEA and DHEAS. Again, DHEAS is the one that is the sulfated form stored in the adrenal cortex and circulates in the blood as a storage form of DHEA. So that's a precursor to other hormones, including estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. So as we get older, this becomes even more important. This becomes, as the ovaries shut down, DHEA and pregnenolone, those hormones coming from the adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys, those start to become our primary source of those sex hormones that are still very important even as we age. So if these levels are low, we can expect that our estrogen, testosterone, progesterone are going to be low in that menopause range. And it is normal for those to start to go low. You're going to start to see symptoms as they do. And then we check a morning cortisol. In addition, I also like to do either salivary cortisol tests throughout the day, because cortisol, peaks in the morning because it helps wake us up. So it's a stress hormone, but it's a good thing. We need a little bit of it or else we die, literally. So it peaks in the morning and then it kind of gradually decreases throughout the day. But for some people, a lot of people who have chronic stress, we check the morning cortisol because I want it to correlate and see where it's at with their blood work. And that one's really to rule out like disease processes. And then the salivary or urinary, if you're doing like a Dutch test complete, it will have the urinary, and it's called a diurnal pattern. So it tracks it over time. So let's say that you have like horrible fatigue in the afternoon. More often than not, I see it track perfectly with the cortisol pattern. So I will see they'll be up in the morning and then it crashes around noon. And then it does not. Either it comes up again in the evening, so then they're tired and wired, or it continues to just be crashed. And it really correlates with their energy levels. So there's a lot that we can do with protocols to help address that system, get them on some adrenal adaptogens like ashwagandha and things like that to help support that system and get their body to recover from that Thyroid panel. So this is one that comes up pretty often. And so the TSH is what's typically done in primary care offices. I have been reading some things from the Endocrinology Society where they are starting to encourage looking at things like free T3, which is great. The free T3 is the activated form of thyroid hormone. So it starts out as T4, and then it goes through a bunch of different processes in the body to be turned into T3. Anywhere within that system, something can go wrong, and then we don't end up with the free T3. So even someone who is on thyroid medication, typically that's levothyroxine, and that is a T4. So if we're not converting that T4 into T3, you're still going to be symptomatic of hypothyroidism. Thyroid antibodies is also something I always check because I have seen people who have normal TSH, normal free T4, normal free T3, but their thyroid antibodies are coming up. We are going in the direction of an autoimmune disorder in the thyroid, and we need to address that quickly or else it can continue. And I will actually put you on a regimen for that. Diet is one of our number one things actually for that. Whereas other primary care providers will go, we'll just watch it and we'll check back in a year. And guess what's going to happen? It's going to continue down that same road because the person doesn't know what to change in order to prevent that from happening. Fasting insulin is another thing we want to look at. As we get older, the insulin resistance starts to go up. Which is not a good thing because then we start going the direction of diabetes. The risk for diabetes does go up as we cross into menopause. Estrogen actually has a lot to do with glucose metabolism, which is super interesting, right? All over the body. It affects everything. It's not just the ovaries and the uterus. So it is important that we check this. Insulin is one of the first markers that I will see start to get elevated. It'll start to go high before we even see other markers of insulin, of like high glucose or anything, because the body's compensating. It's pumping out more insulin. And this hormone, what it does is it takes that sugar that you're eating and it gets it out of the blood and into the cells where it belongs. When it's too high in the blood, it's like shards of glass in your bloodstream. It beats up everything and it just wreaks havoc and causes inflammation, lots of problems. So it's very, very dangerous. We want to make sure that we are addressing this quickly because it causes a lot of problems. And then a hemoglobin A1C, this is the average of the blood sugar over about 3 months or so. But that depends on the lifespan of your red blood cells. So for those women who are anemic, this could be inaccurate because of that anemia. So we need to address the anemia before we can actually look at this and say, oh yeah, it is actually going in the wrong direction. Because if you're anemic, your red blood cells are low, they're dying faster than they're being created, then it's going to look like there's more sugar than there actually is. So it'll be a false positive, basically. So, but this is one of the things that we watch in diabetes. We've got our optimal ranges. You can be pre-diabetic, you can be pre-diabetic. So it's still not within that range that we want you to be. And then additional functional testing, which I'm running out of time in this presentation to go over. The Dutch Complete is one thing that I offer at Antigravity Wellness, and that is a dried urine test. It looks at the sex hormones and the pathways that they go down, which can be very helpful as far as, is the estrogen going down a bad pathway? What about the testosterone? It also looks at cortisol, and it does the full diurnal pattern. Because you're taking this test, you take it in the evening and then you take it at night if you wake up, and then you take it again in the morning. So you take several samples, and so it gives us a nice pattern to look at. And it also looks at some organic acids and some inflammatory markers. So it's a really great, useful test. And then GI map is a stool test that will look at, are there pathogens, such as bad bacteria? What's your good bacteria look like? Because we want good bacteria, and a lot of people are actually too low on that. Are there parasites? Is there blood that's, not necessarily showing up like you can see it, but it's still there? Sometimes that's called occult blood. So it looks at things like that to show us what's going on in the gut. If we have a lot of gut symptoms, and that could be really helpful, especially when someone's already tried things to like do an elimination diet. They're like, well, I felt a little better, but I'm still not there, and something's still going on. This is a good test that I like to run to see what else is going on with them and help them to understand what's going on with their body. All right, so like I mentioned, I put together that initial lab cheat sheet for you. So if you like that, comment labs and I will send over your copy. It is printable. You can print it out and take it in. It's one sheet and say, I would like to try these labs to see if we can find out what's going on. If you're not able to come and see me at Anti-Gravity. And then the Google Doc of resources and further reading will also be in the description. So if you wanted to go deep dive on all of those, you are more than welcome to. So, okay. So you can find me at antigravitywellness.com, at Anti-Gravity Wellness on Instagram, on Facebook. We do have a Facebook group for perimenopause and menopause women that is free. So we'd love to see you in there. And this will be turned into a podcast, so stay tuned for that. We post that on YouTube and also on Spotify. And if you would like, look in the description. You can schedule a free consult call to see if services here at Anti-Gravity Wellness could be right for you, or at least we could just chat things out and see if I can point you in the right direction. So thank you so much for your time and attention. And I will be chatting with you guys later. Again, if you ever have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, drop a comment, send me a DM, or send me an email. All right. Thanks, guys, for joining me today. And I will see you at the next episode. Bye.